I'm pleased today to have Pat Brooke with us. Pat is the Chief Financial Officer of Bethel University. He came to Bethel in 2014, and I was really happy to see Pat arrive because I was the interim CFO for about 6 months, and it was not a job I was prepared for. Pat, on the other hand, is very well prepared for it. He came to us from Wheaton College, where he was the Senior Director for Financial Operations. Pat has an MBA from DePaul University. He's also a CPA, and he has an undergraduate degree from University of Texas at Arlington in business administration and in accounting. Pat, I know you worked as a CPA for a few years before you got into higher education. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how you became a CFO? It's not a career path that I think an 18-year-old would think about very often.
No, it wasn't a career path I was thinking out at 18 either. I started my professional career in computers. I was what today would be called a coder. I was systems analyst for Tandy Corporation. I had a start and stop college career. It took me 8 years. Did 2 years batting my head against the wall, what I was going to do, ran out of money, dropped out, started programming. Working with CPAs on some of the jobs I was working with, I got intrigued about what they knew and took a couple of accounting courses. Intrigued me even more. So when I had an opportunity, I quit work, went back to school full time, finished my BBA at University of Texas at Arlington, moved north. At that time I was married, moved to Illinois, got my CPA in the state of Illinois, and went on and got my master's while I was working, continued on. I did work for a small CPA firm in Illinois for a short number of years. I realized quickly that wasn't a career path for me. I wanted to be in management. I didn't like going into a client, giving them advice and walking away. I wanted to be able to implement the advice. I wanted to see the problems coming and head them off rather than them calling me when it's already in deep weeds. Mm-hmm. Seemed like a more intriguing career for me. So while I was at the CPA firm, a position came up at Wheaton College. I applied and became their controller. Stayed there for almost 30 years. Loved what I was doing. I loved higher education. A few years ago, they did a restructuring, and my position was eliminated. And it was about that time that I met Jay Barnes, president of Bethel. We'd had some conversations. We kept those conversations going. He ended up hiring me as the CFO here. At Wheaton, I reported directly to the Chief Financial Officer. And the gentleman I worked for most of the time I was there, gave me a lot of his work. So even when he went on sick leave for 6 months, I stood in the shoes of the CFO's desk. I guess shoes, desk, that's not right.
I like the metaphor.
Yeah,
we'll go with it.
I'll split it, yeah. So I did that work, was intrigued by it, loved doing it. I loved the combination of my technology background with the volume of numbers that are coming through. Small operations benefit from technology as much as anybody else. And technology costs coming down. It was a great way to combine what I know about technology with where I wanted to go as a financial manager. So it was a good career path for me, and I just love the environment of Christian higher ed.
Right. Well, 30 years, that's a significant portion of your life, so you're clearly committed to it. Mm-hmm. Now, a CFO is, again, it's not a role that people think about as a career path necessarily. Mm-hmm. Can you help people understand what a CFO does on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, the students you work with probably are not thinking in terms of CFO. In the finance arena, it is a career path people look for. If you're going into the corporate world, your goal is someday to be a CFO, typically. The chief financial officer is in fact in charge, as it describes, of all the finances. At different institutions, it's structured differently. In some institutions, anything that's not academic or student life falls under the chief financial officer, or sometimes it's a vice president for finance. In organizations like that, over half the university, half the institution reports to the CFO. But that gets into, we're talking about facilities, we're talking about insurance, we're talking about payroll and everything. It's an area that is seeped in minutia sometimes, but it's also the people who just make every day more pleasant for the people who are running the college, who are actually involved in educating the students. At our institution, at Bethel University, we've gone with an administration model where the CFO primarily focuses in areas of numbers, finance, investments, those sort of things, budgets, and things like facilities and IT actually report to another arena, like a VP for administration or something like that. And that's similar to the model we have at Bethel. And that was structured before I came here. So, so my area, I handle all the business office, all the billings, all the accounting, the financial statements, year-end audits, tax returns. I'm also involved heavily with risk management and the insurance of the facilities. Payroll is a big part of what I work with. A lot of the outside contracts, our food service contracts fall under me and several other significant ones.
So most of what you deal with, people take for granted, I think. They don't think about the infrastructure, the funding that's necessary to get things done. Yes. And really, when I think about higher education, my immediate thought is about professors and learning and instruction. You don't deal with that, but so really the mission of the university goes a different direction than what you deal with on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes I think a cynical person might say, really the finances are counter to the mission of the university. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm speaking from a cynical perspective. Sure. Mm-hmm. How do you keep in mind the mission of Bethel University when you're thinking about how to get food service paid or mm-hmm. deal with insurance or think about balancing a budget?
Yeah, I look at the finances and the money totally opposite from what you just described. Mm-hmm. In my view, money and finances is what enables the mission. You're not going to build a science building with a Sunday school class. You got to hire professional people and it costs a lot of money. Right. And how do you balance short-term needs with long-term needs? I coach people sometimes when they come to me who are thinking about coming out of corporate and going into not-for-profit, generally higher ed, Christian higher ed more specifically. And I tell them there's a bridge that you have to make. And if you can't make that bridge, don't go there. Corporate, the only reason that corporate entity exists is to make money. It's a financial entity. Legally, the intention, you may want to deliver a service, but you're delivering that service because you can do it well and can make money off of it. Nobody should apologize for that because they're delivering good services, they're creating wealth, they're creating jobs. But finance is at the core of what they do. So finance is king in those organizations. And a person who comes up in that organization needs to understand that in higher education, finance is not king. Mission is king. Finance is the servant. And if you can't make that adjustment, you shouldn't come into higher education. You shouldn't come into the not-for-profit world, generally. Now, how does that play itself out? The Vice Chancellor for Finance at U of I spoke at a gathering about credit ratings. We'll may get into that, but it's how your credit worthiness as you're rated as an institution. And he was saying that, from a finance point of view, I want to protect that credit rating, which means I limit my debt and I limit what we take on. But if the mission is we've got to build this building, and it's all agreed that that's the future of the institution, we have to build this $120 million facility. It's not my job not to fund it. It's my job to make sure that happens. Even if it's a ding on our credit rating, mm-hmm. we have to do that because that's mission. So that's how it plays out. Mm-hmm. You have to have the disciplines of finance, which if you come through finance, you're seeped in things like controls, budgetary controls, cash controls. You have to have that in place. And the CFO is typically at the table discussing those things when decisions on buildings and such are made. But when it comes down to it, if moving the mission ahead means you start a new program, then my job changes and it becomes, how do I get the money in to fund the program? Because mission is what we're here for.
So your example of the U of I's vice chancellor, so University of Illinois' vice chancellor, he or she he was talking about building another building for the sake of the mission, right? And it sounds like one of the implications of that could be that higher education becomes over-leveraged, right? That for the sake of the mission, we're willing to compromise in financial controls or to borrow more money than we should. And one of the theories that we're looking at in this course is about higher education is always striving for excellence, and that's driving costs, and excellence is such an horizon concept. You never get there. You can always spend more money. So as a chief financial officer, you're trying to promote excellence, you're trying to promote the mission in a nonprofit environment, and you've got this pressure to do more and more and more. How do you say no graciously? How do you respond to people who are asking for more than you can deliver? And how do you keep the university from becoming over-leveraged without compromising the mission? These are simple questions,
yes.
Right?
That is a daily tightrope that you walk as a CFO. Looping back to the University of Illinois, their credit rating was enviable, as it was. And they did take a hit when they built that new building and got that new bond, and their credit rating went down. It was still enviable. Because they had controls in place, because they had a good CFO who had managed their operations for the long term, had built up the assets as opposed to the debt, they had some wiggle room. They had some room that they could expand in their debt capacity. They have far more debt capacity than they're even taking advantage of yet. That's a different story than the small university, the small institution. We're trying to get to that level where we have a credit rating that somebody envies, where we have excess debt capacity that we could tap into. Right. So it is a different arena. The disciplines of, my main job, if I look over my career here at Bethel, or financially, the whole finance career, my entire goal is, first of all, working for the mission. But when I leave, I want to have improved the financial position of the university. And that's true of what I'm trying to do at Bethel. Some of that is disciplines. Some of it is you don't just build, you build well. There are schools the size of University of Illinois that are in the tank because they have overbuilt. There is a balance you have to look for. You have to have resources available to pay the debt. You have to be able to project out what that building's going to bring in new revenue, and that's a tough thing to do. Difference between projecting and predicting. You can't predict what your enrollment's going to be. You can project that given circumstances, it should grow, and that should pay for the units that you're building onto. So it is a fine line. Less frequently than new structures, institutions like ours don't build $120 million buildings every year, but we frequently have new programs we're trying to get started. Some of that requires money up front that you have to find buying new equipment. It's just what we call one-time costs. Filing fees for accreditation, what have you. There are a lot of expenses up front. There are one-time fees. You just got to find that money. And
just magically.
It's a little more grunt than that. What we've implemented here at Bethel is a plan where when we do have surpluses, operating surpluses, and we've had a number of them, instead of just letting that flitter away, we actually capture that and save it and use that as an investment fund. And we have solved some problems that popped up that weren't on the plans a couple of times. We've had some facility issues where things broke that we weren't expecting. We could tap into that fund for that. But we could also use that fund for investing in new programs, as long as there's funds there. So that little pot has to be managed just like any other pot of money. And the idea of the difference, the part of the fine line that you walk is trying to keep your focus on the long term rather than the short term. There's always short term needs,
Right.
but you got to figure out or wants, frequently what we see. You got to focus on the long term growth. Is this sustainable? Is this going to sustain itself, or is it going to be a drag on the rest of the institution? Sometimes you don't know, and you take a gamble. Sometimes you don't know, but the gamble's too big, so you say no to it. It's not something easy to explain.
Right. Art and science.
Art and science, and a lot of input. I've worked for institutions and corporations where the structure was such that it's geared around the hero, where a person makes the great ideas, a person makes it happen. I find that those days are passing. And even big corporate is finding that. They're moving more toward collaborative business decisions, where you bring in more people. We've got a great structure here at Bethel University. I get lots of input. I can call anybody, and we can do some deep dive into some data. We can look at marketing elements very, very quickly. And so you need a lot of information rather than just, we want to do this.
Right. Right. So one of the things I want students in this course to learn is that asking for money is something that is a skill that can be developed. And you get people asking for money almost on a daily basis, I would guess. What are some attributes of a great budget request when one comes into you? And what are some big red flags when a budget request comes into you? How should people be asking you for money, is what I'm asking.
Well, from a practical point of view, and this is strategically sound, expect a CFO to say no. Not
Right.
because I always say no, but before we let go of hard-earned money, money that we've spent several years developing, or the potential to risk our current income stream, the CFO is skeptical. And it goes beyond just, it costs this, it'll bring in this. Good work on the front end, and a lot of persistence and patience. Programs that look simple may take 2 years to really develop the confidence. The champion for the program may have confidence in it day one and can see the vision. Sometimes a CFO can't see the vision and can't see how the money's going to be there to make this thing sustainable, or is it just going to drag down other programs with a series of losses. So number one, expect to say no, but not from a negative point of view. It's a skeptical point of view. You really got to make sure you prove. Secondly, you got to be persistent, because you got to explain this from 18 different directions. You got to know what's going on. The best program would be an expansion of an existing program that adds a new wrinkle to it that we're already involved with. So if we have a niche market in the sciences, health sciences, and we're going to add something that just expands one part of that, that's an easier thing to do than say we're going to go off and start a trucking school. Right. Because we're going to make a lot of money in trucking. We're skeptical.
And we've experienced that, right? We've had requests that come in from just so far out of bounds.
Not
that it's
specifically
craziness.
trucking, but
right.
Yeah, crazy stuff, because it sounds like we can just make money off of it. Maybe someone can. I'm not sure if people who are focused on the mission of higher ed can make money in all areas. New programs that even in the higher ed area, if just because there's a market ability there doesn't mean we have the ability to deliver it well to that market. At Bethel, we have a niche in the sciences and the health services area. I feel a lot more confident coming out of something that adds on to that portfolio than I would coming out of left field. And just the thoroughness of the presentation.
So
if
building connections to what has come before is a critical part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Connecting it to the mission, it sounds like you're saying, is a critical part of it.
Yeah.
Being willing to be told no 17 times, so the 18th time you present, you're hoping, so that kind of persistence is important.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right.
There's an axiom that goes along in MBA schools. I've heard it, I was taught it, I believed it until I got out working and found out it's not true. Well, it's not possible. It may be true, but it's not possible. The idea is if you can accurately project the net present value, the return on any investment that has a positive return, you should buy into. You'll always make money. What I found out is, number one, that assumes unlimited access to capital. We don't have that.
Right.
And it assumes that whatever you're projecting, you have an expertise to carry it out well. And nobody does. I mean, there's some conglomerate corporations out there that can get into a variety of different things. Typically, they do it by buying existing companies. But not a lot of organizations can do multiple separated, disaggregated things very, very well. So higher education, you need to stay in higher education. Accent some of the things that you can do with what you have. Occasionally, brainstorm will come along, and it's compelling, and it can be a big winner for you. But not all of them are. It takes time to weed through all the applications, all the ideas, to get those little golden nuggets. Mm-hmm. And then over half the time, unfortunately, the golden nuggets don't pan out the way you thought they would.
Right. Turns out good ideas have to be developed in the right environment, by the right people, with the right resources over time, and that's very tough.
It is. And I'm not a big fan of overanalyzing either. If there's a very small cost to get into something new, I say jump in and make your mistakes as you go. Mm-hmm. You can analyze the iPhone for 30 years and say it can't be done. Or somebody can just go out and do it and put it on the market and changes the world.
Right. Go back to art and science, right? How do you know
that
an idea is a great idea?
Yeah.
It's tough to know.
It's tough to know.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit.
Sure. Shift away.
The state of higher education right now is not the most promising it's ever been. I'd say it's a very tough environment that we're operating in. Correct. What do you see right now as the biggest issues facing higher education, and what hope do you have for navigating through those challenges?
Higher education may be looking at an overcapacity issue. The demographics coming out of the high schools, it's just fewer students. I think the long-term view is we'll tip upward aggregately across the nation, high school students that are college ready. I think those numbers go up for a few years and then they drop again. The Council of Independent Colleges did a survey. That's a large group of schools. 80% of their institutions missed their enrollment goals this last year.
That's over 750 schools is what I understand.
Yes, and that to me signals an overcapacity. It's not necessarily all just we've got too many schools. Higher education is facing competition it's never had to face before. A sharp student coming out of high school can spend $10,000 and get some certifications with Microsoft or Google as a coder and get a job making $70,000 a year, $80,000 a year. Python coders can get up to $100,000 a year as entry level. That's hard to compete with. So a lot of college, with the high price of college, with the debt that people take on, and certainly coming out of a decade or so of high unemployment. It's getting better now. It's much better now. Has been for the last couple of years. But the unemployment, it's been frustrating for college graduates to see getting a job. And with so many college students unemployed for that period of time, the ones coming out of high school want a cheaper way to get out and get a job. So they're taking on these micro degrees, nano degrees, certifications, credentials out of Microsoft and Google, et cetera, and getting jobs like that. The other competitor that's really grown are the for-profit schools. It's still higher education. It's a really different model than what Christian higher ed goes through. It's a lot of online, and it's a lot of very inexpensive degrees. Are they the same quality degree? I hope for the students' sake they are. But it's a different competition that we haven't had to compete with before. And I think higher education generally moves slow. Some of that is shared governance because faculty have a great role to play in making a lot of decisions, but that's more decision-making people in the loop. Corporations who could make a quick decision on iPhones, there's more work involved in making those decisions. So some of these other organizations are more nimble. We're slow to react, and we have been historically slow to react to this new competition. And most schools are trying to do what they did 15 years ago. They can't do it. Bethel can't do it. The few schools that can do it are the heavyweights, the Yales, the Harvards. If you have that kind of funding behind you, you can run education any way you want to. There's not a magic way. You just got a lot. You can throw tons of money at a problem and make it change.
Right. So the demographics are shifting. The number of students is declining. The number of institutions has actually increased. Mm-hmm. So the competition is tremendous, and that for a tuition-driven institution like Bethel, that's got to create a lot of heartburn for you.
It does.
And in the middle of that stress that I know that you carry, what do you find in your job that can give you joy? What do you find that sustains you from day to day as you're dealing with really the weight of the institution, the weight of $150 million of expenses and problems? Mm-hmm. How do you thrive in what you do?
Well, until I heard you, I was feeling pretty good.
Right.
You make it sound horrible.
No, I know that there are things that you love about your work.
I love my work. I've been in it for a long time. I love the Christian mission. I love the fact that I'm serving Christ in this way because it's a talent I have and He can use me. I love that part of it. I love the people I work with. I love developing people, and that's a fairly recent thing for me. I'm an introvert. I tend to go into spreadsheets and get lost. Managing for the last 10 or 15 years, my eyes have been opened up to people relationships within the corporation. And I have a whole new appreciation for them. And in interdisciplinaries, working with faculty, working with people that I would never normally have an interaction with. I have a number of meetings on campus of people I just want to be in front of them for an hour a month. And I usually don't have any kind of a business transaction with them. I just want to be there with them. I want to know what they're thinking. I want to learn from them. Maybe they can learn something from me. I enjoy that tremendously. I love fixing problems. And I can't make the big problems go away, but I can chip at the edges of it. We have at Bethel University gone through, as you say, some challenges demographically. Being able to find, over the last 5 years, $5 million that you can trim out of the budget because you just do things differently. Stop doing things you used to do before. We were able to refinance our bond this last year. If I had a corporate mindset, I would say look at all the money I just saved. Look at the new profit picture we have.
Right.
In my higher education, Christian higher education mindset, I say, look at the money we can now redeploy and finish on the mission, where we can build, put that money into capital structures, redo dormitories, build new buildings. That is the biggest thrill I have, being able to move things ahead. I said earlier that one of the things I want to do over my career is improve the financial position, financial strength of the university. That would be a success. Every financial statement is a chance for me to have some of that joy. Every financial statement I can see that growth, whether it's in the bottom line net assets, looking at the growth in the investments in the endowment fund. I got to be, that's a key case in point. Over the last year, we examined our endowment fund, looked at 10 new managers, found a new investment manager to come in. They're doing great guns, much better performance than what we were getting before. That's a thrill for me, and not a thrill because there's a bottom line profit and I'm going to get a bonus. That's corporate mindset. The mission mindset is that's money that's making our balance sheet stronger, is making us more sustainable. It's just a stronger institution. I heard also at a conference, I heard a college president say one time that the little ditty that she teaches every faculty member in her institution that says, there's no mission without margin. Right. We're not for profit, and that means certain things in the tax law. It doesn't mean you're not supposed to grow. You're not supposed to make a margin on what you do. That's how you reinvest in programs. That's how you reinvest. If we make a $4 million operating surplus, that's not money that's going to go into somebody's pocket. That's money that's going to go into the institution, captured, reinvested in capital, put back into new programs. Those are the things that make me smile when I go home at night.
That sense of mission really comes through. Your commitment to Christian higher education for more than 30 years is actually inspiring. And I appreciate you taking time today to be part of this. I know the students will appreciate that. So thank you for your time.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Great.